Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Patriots Revival. I am really hoping that you are tuning in for part 2 of our Beyond the Ballot series. If you watched or listened to last week's episode, it was part 1 of this series, and we interviewed Randy Bellomy, county chair for the Ellis County Republican Party. And Randy discussed all things precinct convention, which is the next step after you cast your ballot. This week, we have part 2 of our Beyond the Ballot series, in which we are interviewing Randy yet again to talk about all things county and Senate conventions. So stay tuned. You don't want to miss this episode. Howdy. My name is Melody Allen. I'm a follower of Christ, native Texan, a wife, Texas Aggie, Bible study leader, Christian conservative political activist, and the host of the Patriots Revival podcast. Here on Patriots Revival, we share the good news of Christ and discuss the current political climate in relationship to truth and God's Word. In doing so, we hope to educate, inspire, and encourage Christian conservatives to make a radical return to God's Word as it relates to politics and every aspect of life. And we hope to get folks involved to help restore God to government. We've got dust on the Bible, so we need a revival, a Patriots Revival. So Randy, we talked last week about the importance of being involved in your precinct convention.
Yes.
Want to talk a little bit today about the importance of that next step of the county convention, because to recap, we talked about you can, at your precinct convention, elect to be a delegate at your I keep saying county convention, but as we discussed, it's really based on your Senate district.
Correct.
Within your county.
Correct.
And we brought up the example of you can bring up resolutions at your precinct convention, and that's what ultimately leads to them possibly being heard in the state legislature. I know we haven't gotten that far down the road, but if I have an idea, and we brought up last week my idea of I want Labrador Retrievers to be the state dog of Texas, that if it passes at precinct convention, or maybe it even fails, but it's brought up at the Senate convention at the county level, it could still gain life and continue to be looked at as an issue that we continue to move up the chain. Want to talk a little bit about what that next step of involvement looks like.
Well, thank you once again, Melody, to being able to speak to this subject because so many people that, as we had been talking earlier, have moved into our state and don't know our process.
Right.
And so once you've gone to your precinct convention, let's say you were selected to be a delegate, you will be notified of the location and stuff like that, usually by email, because we try to do everything electronically to save money,
Sure.
to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But you need to show up because you were elected at your level. So once you get there and you sign in as a delegate, you'll get a badge at the county convention.
Okay.
Now, if you were selected to be one of the committee members, and then you are there usually an hour prior to the convention opening up for what they call a temporary committee.
Now, when you say if you're selected to be a committee member at the convention, that typically occurs in January, a few months before the county convention. So I want to stress to our audience that, hey, it would be great if they get involved and stay involved year round, because if you want to be on a committee at the county or Senate convention, those are appointed or selected in January. Am I correct on that?
That is correct. In the January meeting, the temporary chairman is selected by the precinct chairs.
Okay.
And then the person is selected as the temporary senatorial district chairman. Then we'll start putting together the committees.
Okay.
And most of the time, that is, like you said, people that are involved or precinct chairs which we believe it should be very involved,
Right.
then those are put on the committees. As we were discussed earlier, though, we have had issues where somebody had to be appointed into a committee on the day of because of illness, surgeries, all kinds of circumstances can happen that person couldn't make it.
Sure.
You have to have at least 5 members on the committee in order for it to be what we call a legal committee.
Maybe share with the audience, what are those committees specifically?
Okay, you have your nominations committee, which nominates the delegates that will go to the state convention. Then you have the resolutions. That's
Okay.
where your resolutions come in.
That started at that precinct convention.
Started at that precinct convention, correct.
Okay.
And number 3 is you have organization committee, which organizes the convention in itself.
Maybe the logistics of it, like venue, time, all those great details.
Right. They also set up usually lunch. They
Right.
set up breakfast. They also set up where the different precincts are seated
Okay.
in the floor.
Okay.
And you'll have polls usually there or some type of sticker on the chairs indicating where your precinct will sit.
Okay.
You have assigned areas,
So the fourth committee is
credentials.
okay.
And in credentials, it's a matter of deciding whether you were elected at your precinct convention.
Just confirming all of that. really.
Correct.
Okay.
And they also confirmed either you've signed the oath of affiliation or you have voted.
Okay.
So that's one of the committees that also sits. They have to determine the delegate numbers, how many are eligible to vote. In other words, you also have to determine the eligibility, like I
Sure.
said. So once they get that determined, then that is then handed to the temporary chairman. It's all under the temporary. Is the first half of the convention is actually temporary until you elect a permanent chair, then you elect a permanent committees,
Mhm.
and they will operate from that point on as permanent. And what is decided in that mode is what will move on to state.
Okay.
Also, in your temporary, under your temporary, you set up temporary rule, and then when you go to permanent, you set up permanent rules.
So that's the fifth
committee.
Okay.
So, in fact, I'll be sitting on the rules committee at Senatorial District 22. I didn't know if you had been appointed to a committee or not.
I am not on a committee, but I am the secretary of.
Of the convention.
I am.
You wouldn't be able to do both.
Okay,
really.
right. So that is the area in which I am serving for our Senate
So
County Convention.
that's one of the officers of the convention, and it's just a good thing to talk about at this time.
Sure.
There's a temporary chairman, temporary secretary, a temporary sergeant of arms, and
Parliamentarian is the
then
other?
you have temporary parliamentarian,
Okay.
and then you have your committees.
Right.
All those 9 positions are filled prior to the conventions even starting,
Yes.
but they govern the first half of the convention.
Exactly.
Then once the committees finish their work, then they will report back to the temporary. And the first thing you do is elect a permanent chairman. Now, most of the time, because of the knowledge he has helped put and organize that all together, the temporary chairman becomes the permanent chair. It's not, it does not have to be that way. If you don't think he's doing a good job and you want to replace him with somebody that may have more experience or something, that can be done at that point. Any of those positions can be nominated from the floor. Now, once the chairman is nominated and elected, then he appoints the permanent chair committee members. But once again, the delegates out in sitting on the floor can ask for a member to be removed and somebody substituted for them, or they could add somebody to that committee. This person has certain expert in this particular topic I know is heavily discussed in the committee. We would like to add him to the committee. That can be done.
Right.
Just because it looks like it's a machine that's running and all, the delegates still have the right to substitute, eliminate any individual all the way down the line.
They have voting power at that.
They have voting power. Just like as secretary, she can't spell or read or write. We want to remove her.
Right. Maybe so.
So as a delegate, you have power. For first timers, it's kind of daunting. There are rules you have to abide by.
Right.
Our party is governed by state election code, which is very daunting because it's very thick book with lots of rules. It's also can be by state party rules, or it can be by, Robert's Rules of Order. Robert's Rules of Order is the basic form that is used in any convention. If you know some Robert's Rules of Order, it helps you to be in the process and know kind of how things are going to happen.
And for our audience at home who may not know anything at all about Robert's Rules of Order, what you're referring to is how to bring forth a motion and vote and acceptable debate. And that is the order that we follow, because if we didn't have this in place, think about the chaos that could ensue if there's not a process to keep us focused and on task.
Robert's Rules of Order, like I said, is just a process that the conventions use in order to keep order.
Yeah.
Because if you have nothing but a shouting match,
Right.
then nothing
would
gets
get
done.
done. Yeah.
People say that, well, why do you have sergeant of arms? Well, people get passionate about things and they want to speak out about it. But it's not that they can't speak out. They have to do it in order.
Have to wait their turn and follow if there's a time limit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is correct. So, most people abide by the rules.
Right.
It's pretty common decorum and all. But we have to keep order in order for the process to run smoothly. There's legal reasons why we have to. Now, your temporary rules committee will take into consideration lots of different angles to help the convention run smoother. Like they might say, okay, you got 3 minutes for debate, 2 minutes for rebuttal, something like that, or they may not even allow a rebuttal.
So the Rules Committee establishes that before we go to our Senate County Convention, correct?
Well,
Do I have that right?
actually, no. It's the Rules Committee, as all committees, they have temporary meetings prior to the convention. Okay. And rules suggestions can be made at that point by anybody that has voted or signed the oath of affiliation and wants to participate in the process. The Rules Committee then can take those rules and they'll decide what they want to present to the convention. They will usually meet 1 hour prior to the convention convening in the same location. The other meetings prior to that, which are announced on our website, will usually meet either here at the headquarters or another location that is determined throughout the county so that people can attend those meetings and suggest any rules that they want. Once that committee meets, then we'll suggest in the permanent status rule changes. And those rule changes will then be voted on by the delegates. It's not just something that is given to you. You get to vote on whether what you want to do that. You might stand up and say, no, I don't want 3 minutes. I want 5 minutes to be able to discuss.
This is all decided before these resolutions are brought forth in the next portion of the convention.
That is correct. That will be the temporary rules that the convention will operate on. Now, because we have Senatorial District 2 and Senatorial District 22 meeting in the same building but different rooms, they could have actually different rules. It depends on what the people think is best.
Sure.
As a delegate, you have rights. You get to vote on it. Majority wins.
Yeah.
Once the rules are determined, and that, like I said, that governs the convention through the rest of the convention. We've talked about the Credentials Committee, which determines whether or not you're a delegate. The Rules Committee determines the rules that you're operating under. The Resolutions Committee is the one that most people are involved in, because that's where they get to say from their soapbox what they want to do.
Sure.
That dog wants to be, I want it to be a Labradoodle. You want to be a Labrador.
Right.
So the pros and cons to that. That's where you get to testify before the committee and give your reasons for that. The committee members will consider that, and then they will vote what they were going to present to the convention.
So when those rules are determined, if it's determined that I have 5 minutes to speak or testify, as you said, that means in that time, I can get up and share all of my reasons for why I want a Labrador Retriever to be the state dog of the day. And am I understanding that correctly?
Well, yes and no. Okay. That's what will happen on the floor when you're in the convention itself. But the committee members get to determine their rules. So they may say, you only get 2 minutes, because I had 500 people that we have to listen to.
Sure.
So they can set different rules and test that you can testify to. And so they might also say, okay, we got 32 people here are talking on the same subject, we're only going to allow 6.
Okay. So they'll even hone in on limiting the amount of testimony that can be shared.
Yes, because to be conscious of the amount of time, the resolutions and the nominations committee are the two longest takes the longest amount of time for them to get to the convention floor with their report. They have to do this because otherwise testimony could go on for days.
Sure.
And you might stand up there, well, I've got 16 subjects to talk to. Man, you got 2 minutes to do it
Yeah.
in.
Exactly.
Now, the committee can rule, okay, you have a lot of facts. We need to know these facts. So we're going to extend your time. They have that ability to do that if they want to.
Okay.
Usually it requires a member speaking to the chairman saying, Chairman, or the chairman doing this, I want to hear more from this individual. Can we allow him X number of minutes more?
I guess I did not even know that.
Yes.
That was
The committees have a lot of latitude to do different things like that, especially if you're getting a controversial subject that has a lot of passion behind it.
Sure.
And a lot of people want to speak. A lot of times you're just hearing the same testimony. And I understand. I have even seen people go to a committee meeting. Well, I'm representing the following people. So please stand up. 50 people stand up. And we're all saying the same thing. And this is what we believe. The committee can appreciate that because they know that you're not trying to snow them with all this continuous doing the same thing. Same thing in the second longest, or probably the longest actually, is the resolution. Nominations chooses the delegates that will go to your state convention.
Now, how is that determined, Randy? Because a numbers geek like me might want to know, where does that number come from?
It's all determined on your gubernatorial vote. If you voted for Governor Abbott, let's say round numbers of 22,000 people voted for Governor Abbott, then they will choose a number, and it varies from year to year because they have to keep the delegation to state at a roughly 9,000 delegates and 9,000 alternates availability. So that's 18,000 people there. So they choose a number to divide the governor's vote in your county, in your senatorial district,
So it's a percentage of that vote cast for.
Mm-hmm. The more votes that you cast for Governor Abbott, because he was the winner, is the more delegates you're going to get. And so that's how that's determined. Because those delegates, like I said, there are many delegates and many alternates. In years past, we've had a hard time filling those because of participation. But as the party has grown here in the county, those positions are starting to be filled up. So when you present your credential, and what I mean by credentials in this respect is that I helped this campaign. I did this for this. I did this phone banking. I passed out this literature. I blocked walked. Your participation is your credentials in the party, showing that you are very active. You know a lot about the subjects and stuff of which will be considered at the state convention. You also have worked and invested time into the political process. Somewhat, it's a little bit of a reward for those individuals to get to go.
That's not to say, though, that if you have someone who's brand new and they are just getting their feet wet in involvement, it doesn't mean that they will not be selected to represent at the state level. It just,
Correct.
it's very possible for a newbie, if you will, to still have the opportunity to be a delegate at two state conventions.
I'd only been in politics for the first time state convention I went to in 1976. I'd only been involved a couple of years. Yeah, I was new, but they saw that I was working in the party and I went as an alternate. Well, as typical, there's a lot of people that things happen. They couldn't go. And that's the reason why we have alternates to fill in those slots. And so I was seated almost immediately. Just because you're an alternate doesn't mean you're not worthy of the upper spot. It means that there's probably somebody there that's been more active and they know pretty much where you stand and what you know. So the nomination committee will compile a list of names for delegates and for alternates. Last year, or 2 years ago with state convention, we didn't even fill all our alternate list. I'd love to see that filled this time. The state convention, because there are so many things going on, it's good to go as an alternate and just to view what's going on in order to learn the process and stuff. You can also have a little bit more fun because you're not having to stay in tuned so much as what's going on. So when we get to the state convention, there's just a lot of things that go on in that week for you to participate in. But getting back to our Central District meeting, once we get the nominations on the floor, that doesn't mean it's solid at that point. It is not solid until the delegates vote on it. Substitutions can be made. I don't think he needs to be a delegate. Put him as alternate number 60. We want so-and-so on the alternate list moved up, or we want somebody else totally in the delegate. You go through that process. That's part of Robert's Rules of Order, is that process of how to nominate somebody to take a position. As you go through that, there's some things online that you can go through, and it's kind of a quick guide of Robert's Rules of Order, of what to do in a convention. Generally, we tried to also publish a sheet of that at our county convention so people can see, so that you can see those motions and stuff of that nature. Generally, we don't use that at the precinct level because we're not usually that formal, but it steps up a significant amount when you go into a senatorial district. And so we have a lot of things that you can participate in and start seeing the process. One of the main committees to help with a lot is organization. They have a lot of things to get in order for that, to keep that convention running smoothly.
That might be a good one for a first timer to get their feet wet, because you're not so overwhelmed with rules and credentials. It's essentially, like you said, organization, finding the venue, arranging a meal for breakfast and lunch, and just start to work out those details, and then would you recommend, maybe that's a good one to.
That's a good one for a first-time person,
Yeah.
especially if they're haven't been politically inclined to try and get on one of the main ones, which would be resolutions
Right.
or nominations, which takes knowing a lot of people and researching, finding out about those people.
Yeah.
So those are the two harder ones to be on, even though those are two the most desired.
Yeah.
So you could also be part of the sergeant of arms. There's usually the sergeant of arms, then he will choose other people to help him. And those individuals, let's say we had a police officer that was interested in coming to the convention, and he wanted to help. Be an excellent individual to choose for sergeant of arms. Traditionally, we usually do have several policemen there.
Yeah.
And so those areas you can get into, because those committees are not limited in the number that they will have.
Okay.
And actually, no committee is, but it's better to operate. If you get 9 people on a committee, it gets harder and harder to get decisions done because all 9 have to participate to get the answers that they need in order to make a vote. At our state convention, and if your representative is pushing for the Labrador to win, it's a good chance it's going to make it through.
So to recap the Senate district, senatorial district convention, first half of the day is really, it's going from the temporary to the permanent, establishing the rules, laying all the foundation for preparing to discuss or address and discuss the resolutions that have been brought before through the resolutions committee.
Correct.
Okay. But we're now to the point where we've gotten through that. Usually, in your past experience and my past experience, that first part is usually the first half of the day, right? And so we've gotten all of that order and business out of the way. Now we move into the hearing of those resolutions, and that process occurs.
Well, there's one other thing that I want to mention prior to that. While committee members are discussing and taking testimony, there's always a kind of a lag time in between for the delegates, unless they're testifying or wanting to sit in on committees. At that point, we generally have statewide candidates that are coming through and speaking to us.
Yeah.
We might have anywhere from a presidential all the way down to a commissioner wanting to speak to us. Most of them have already been won in the primary, but there's still some runoffs at that point. So you may have 2 people coming to speak for one race.
I will say, speaking from being involved in our previous convention, that was one thing that I always looked forward to, was that time where, okay, maybe my state senator Bob Hall is going to show up, as he did last time, and our state rep Brian Harrison showed up, and maybe Judge Little. And so there again, I want to stress to everybody, this is a great way for people who are just getting involved to actually see and meet some of our elected officials when they come and speak at this county convention.
Absolutely. There's plenty of time to talk to them. Now, granted, our state senators are having to bop around to 8 to 12 counties.
You may not be able to sit in their ear for 20 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. But you could hear them speak for 5 or 10 minutes.
The local people, you definitely would be able to get a hold of their hand and get to talk to them.
Yeah.
And feel them out. Now, remember that a lot of them are delegates. A lot of them could be on committees.
Right.
And so they may have a limited amount of time also because they have duties to perform.
Sure. So we bring forth the resolutions. Those are voted on by the delegates in that Senate district for that convention. And at that point, now I do have a question for you on those, because you mentioned at our precinct convention, my resolution of wanting the Labrador Retriever to be the state dog of Texas, if it failed at my precinct convention, maybe enough people brought it up in multiple precincts in our county that the resolutions committee decided to bring that forth at our county senatorial convention, it could still be heard there.
Correct.
So here's my question is, if it fails at our county convention, it does it die there, or does it still have life to be brought up at the state convention?
Well, some of that is at the prerogative of the state convention temporary committee chairman or members.
Okay.
Okay. Let's say, yes, all failed resolutions still go to the state party and are given to the committee.
And so it's the same thing. There'll be a resolutions committee at the state level, and they will have access to all of these resolutions, pass and fail, at the county level.
Correct.
Okay.
At the state level, like I told you before, the committee has minimum of 32 members. So the chairman might assign 6 or 8 of them. Okay, look through the bone pile, so to speak, and see if there's anything there that needs to come forth. If it's a reoccurring theme, let's say there's 40 precincts out there said, I want that dog to be, our state dog. Then they would say, okay, this has got some validity. There's those people out there that are really talking about that dog. So there's a possibility of being resurrected that way. But there's another way. And here's the why you need to be a delegate to state is you can present that to the committee. You can submit it at state right there. Now, the state of Texas is grassroots motivated. We're the strongest state in the union that does that. Our grassroots run the party more than anything. A lot of people say, nah, all this is pre-chosen and stuff like that. I understand their thinking because they're only seeing a part of that issue. They don't see the process that we're talking about and end results and how you can affect the government and who is in the legislation that is brought forth. Developing this platform from the very beginning at the precinct convention gives us the power to show these legislators that they need to listen to us. And where else can you do that?
Right. Well, Randy, I really appreciate you coming on today to help us educate our audience on step 2, which is the senatorial / county convention.
Well, thank you, Melody. I've really enjoyed talking about this. It's always a passion of mine. This will be my 25th go at this, so
Wow. That's impressive.
Been in it a lot of years.
Yes, and that's why we wanted to have you on, because of 25 years of knowledge of attending conventions.
Actually, it's 50. It's every 2 years.
Oh, that's right. Your 25th convention, 50th year. That's impressive. Thank you, Randy. Well, that wraps up part 2 of our Beyond the Ballot series and our interview with Randy Bellomy, County Chair of the Ellis County Republican Party. I really hope that learning a little bit more about our county convention / Senate convention will get you fired up and you will want to attend that convention. It is a lot of fun, in my opinion. I always get giddy and look forward to our county convention. We'll have elected officials there that will come and speak, and you can also see the process, as Randy talked about in this interview, of how we vote on resolutions that hopefully go up even to the next level, which is our state convention. So make plans to attend that. Before we close today, I want to just go over our calendar of events for those of you that are local. We'll start with the Ellis County Young GOP. If you yourself or you have in your household or have some grandkids that are between the ages of 16 and 40, I know that the Ellis County GOP would love to get them involved. So they are meeting on Tuesday, March 19th at our Ellis County Republican Party headquarters, which is at 613 Ferris Avenue in Waxahachie, Suite 107. Then, of course, we have our county and Senate convention, which we just talked about in this episode. and that's for Senate District 2 and Senate District 22. Basically, if you live in Ellis County and you're a Republican, then this is your convention. Registration starts at 8 a.m. That is going to be held at Lakeview Camp and Retreat Center, which is at 5128 FM 66 in Waxahachie. And then going a little bit further out on our calendar is the Ellis County GOP monthly meeting. We meet on the first Tuesday of every month, and that is always held at the after church at 1511 Ovilla Road in Waxahachie. That's a wedding venue. That's why it's named that. And it starts with a social hour at 5:30. The social hour is from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. And then the regular monthly meeting starts at 6:30 p.m. And this is a great way for you to get involved as well, because there are elected officials there. We will have candidates that are running for school board and city council there, and they will be giving a little spiel about themselves. We allow candidates that are on upcoming ballots to speak for 2 minutes. So this is a great way for you to get to learn about those candidates. And we have runoffs that will be occurring right here within our county on May 28th. So the candidates that are in that runoff should be present as well, and also be getting up to give a little 2-minute spiel about themselves. And then even a little bit further out on our calendar is the Ellis County Republican Women. That is Tuesday, April 9th. I'm a part of that group. We meet at the Waxahachie Chamber office, which is now located in downtown Waxahachie at 412 South Rogers. We have refreshments starting at 6:15 p.m., and then our meeting kicks off at 6:30 p.m. That particular meeting, we have a guest speaker coming, a director from Blexit. Blexit is, if you're not sure what that is, Blexit is an organization that is formed for African Americans and about African Americans exiting the Democrat Party and coming over to the Republican Party. So you don't want to miss that. That is very important. Also, what kind of ambassador for Christ would I be if I didn't share about my own church and invite you to attend the church in which I'm a member and am part of a Bible study group there? And I am a member at the Cowboy Church of Ellis County, which is located at 2374 West Highway 287 bypass. If you're familiar with Waxahachie at all, it's across from Waxahachie High School, basically, and the Waxahachie Ag Barn. There's some apartments right off of 287. It is a great church, folks. We have a phenomenal pastor. So would love for you to attend. We have 2 services on Sundays, 8:30 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. If you come to the 10:30 a.m. service, that is the one that I attend. Would love to see you and meet you there, and hopefully get you involved in our church as well, and share the gospel with you. As always, we have an altar call to conclude each week's episode. And this week's altar call is, I would like you to come to our county and Senate district convention, which again is Saturday, March 23rd. Registration starts at 8 a.m. This is a great way for you to get involved and kind of watch the process of these resolutions. So that is your altar call for this week. So today I'm going to do something I haven't done since I started Patriots Revival. I'm going to share the full context of Psalm 119:25, because I typically only share the latter portion of that. The full context of Psalm 119:25 says, I lie in the dust, revive me by your word. And what do we say in our opening? That we've got dust on our Bibles, so we need a revival. Hopefully you are not lying in the dust, or your Bible is not lying in the dust. But if it is, get in God's word. Open it up, dust it off, come to church. Let God revive you by his word. Remember, revival starts with one person. So I'm hoping this episode will help you want to get into God's word. And I'm hoping that this episode will revive your inner patriot. That's all we have for this week. See you next week for part 3 of our Beyond the Ballot series, in which we talk about the state convention. See you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please follow us and tell others. If today's show revived your faith and your inner patriot, join the Patriots Revival Facebook group by going to facebook.com/groups/Patriots Revival for resources on how to get involved in being salt and light in a world of darkness. Are you local to the Ellis County, Texas area? If so, check out the Patriots Revival podcast, The Local Show, for info on local issues, candidates and elections, a calendar of events of conservative organizations in the area, and ways for you to get involved. Finally, if you would like to contribute to the production costs of the Patriots Revival podcast, you can do so through Zelle by inputting info@patriotsrevival.com as the recipient. Thanks again for listening. I hope you have a reviving week.